Good morning, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News, coming to you from our digital desk. We're about to take you to a news conference happening live at the County Administration Building here in downtown Cleveland. The topic here that's going to be discussed by state and local Democrats that are holding this news conference is the valuations that have been mailed out to Cuyahoga County residents. Let's remember how this process works. Your property taxes are based on what the value is of your home, and the county gets to determine the value of your home every 6 years. That is an Ohio state law. The problem with that is that you can get drastic changes in 6 years. Let's think about 6 years ago. This is before any of us have even heard the word COVID. Everything is moving along. The economy is doing fine, but then COVID hits and we see this influx of money. We have seen the housing market go through the roof, and that has given people some I guess a shock when they open up the letter from the county and find out that the county says your home is worth X percent more than what it was 6 years ago. Why is that an issue? Well, because that means your property tax is going to have to go up by X percent. Is it percentage point for percentage point? We're not sure yet. But we're going to hear from County Executive Chris Ronayne, as well as State Representative Bride Rose Sweeney. She represents Westlake. We have Representative Sean Brennan. He is from Parma, and Democrat Representative Philip Robinson, who represents Solon. We do expect to hear from all three of those individuals more about what can be done more than just trying to fight your evaluation. Let's take you live now to County Executive Chris Ronayne.
Good morning and welcome. I'm Chris Ronayne, Cuyahoga County Executive. Today I'm joined by State Representative Bride Rose Sweeney, State Representative Phil Robinson, and State Representative Sean Brennan. We're glad you're here today to talk about the issues of property tax appeals at this news conference today. Also want to recognize Councilpersons Meredith Turner, who is here, and Councilman Dale Miller, who's the chair of our Finance Committee. Thank you for being here. We're here today to address a pressing concern that impacts many in our community: rising property values, resulting in higher property taxes that will put undue strain on property owners. After nearly 20 public meetings, calls, emails, and other ways of communicating with us, we've heard your concerns. And we understand the financial burden these taxes will place on families trying to make ends meet. Here at Cuyahoga County, we're here to help with resources that we have available to you. I've challenged our fiscal teams to develop solutions to assist our property owners. I want to thank them for being here today. Michael Chambers, our County Fiscal Officer, Brad Cromas, our Treasurer, Ron O'Leary, our Board of Revisions Director, and Katie Gallagher, our Chief Operations Officer. This is the team that's helping with solutions. Coming this fall, a locally funded program to provide assistance to our most vulnerable taxpayers, particularly our senior citizens experiencing tax delinquency. This program will include direct assistance for paying property taxes and housing counseling services to ensure taxpayers have the tools to stay on path to financial stability. Other helpful resources include the homestead exemption, easy pay, and owner occupancy credits, to name a few. Cuyahoga County wants to work with the residents of Cuyahoga County on payment plans and payment options. We want to work with you, so come visit us or call us with your questions. Cuyahoga County is one of 5 counties that offer informal challenges in this process. And there's still time for residents to submit their property valuation challenges. The deadline is this Friday, August 30th, 3 days from now. If you think your valuation is too high, tell us. You can also submit online at cuyahogacounty.gov. You can drop off your challenge in person, and you can also mail it as long as it's postmarked by this Friday, August 30th. As a reminder, a 30% increase in value does not necessarily mean a 30% increase in your taxes. Again, valuation increase does not mean tax increase. Our work doesn't stop here. We're committed to finding ways to help alleviate the tax burden, which means going to where it all started, Columbus. It's why I'm glad to be joined today by our state representatives who are doing something about this problem, but they need help across the board from the state delegation. The property valuations, again, are state mandated, and our state lawmakers, these with me today, are affecting real change. I've been working closely with my colleagues and partners, many in this room at the state level, to make a difference for our residents, and you will hear from our state representatives shortly. We are calling on the state legislature to act now on several bills that could provide much-needed tax relief for our residents here in Cuyahoga County. Together, we can alleviate the burden on property owners and create a much more just and sustainable system for the future. Here joining me now are our representatives to talk more about their programs and the initiatives before the state legislature. It's my pleasure to introduce Representative Bride Rose Sweeney and bring her to the podium. Thank you, Bride.
Good morning, everyone. I am State Representative Bride Rose Sweeney, the representative for the 16th House District and the western portion of Cuyahoga County. I am so grateful to County Executive Ronayne for doing everything within his power to get help for the residents of our county. I know that there is not one elected official at any level that has not heard directly from the people that they represent about how terrified they are about their ability to pay for these likely unprecedented increases in their property taxes, who have looked at the people that they represent who said, I'm afraid that I'm going to be taxed out of our home because of the government. While it's exemplary what the county is doing, it shouldn't have to be that way. Let me be crystal clear. Not only is the property crisis we are facing a direct result of the legislature's failure to act, it is also the direct result of the legislature's intentional policy platform to shift the burden of property taxes to working families, to middle-class Ohioans, and to our senior citizens. As Ohio lawmakers who are solely responsible for creating the Ohio tax system, we in Cuyahoga County lawmakers have been fighting to lower your property taxes and create a more fair system that doesn't constantly rely on property tax owners to pick up the tab. We're here today to call on state leaders in Columbus to get serious about actually helping the people that we represent. Now, it's important to understand why this is a problem. People's taxes are going up because their home values are increasing. However, because your home value increases does not mean that Ohioans all of a sudden have more money in their pockets. Ohio's tax system should ask people to pay their fair share, but it shouldn't arbitrarily overburden them because of the whims of the housing market. At the end of the day, high property taxes are a choice. It is a choice that the state it's a choice to eliminate the state rollbacks that used to pay for a portion of our local property taxes. It's a choice to not pay its fair share of our local schools, meaning most of our local schools are forced to go to the ballot, increasing our local taxes. It's a choice for the state to create loopholes so that those who can afford expensive lawyers can get out of paying taxes, while we know that the everyday Ohioan is absolutely not afford that same luxury. And it is absolutely a choice to do nothing about it. A choice that the majority party in Columbus that has had control for more than a decade has decided. Instead of prioritizing long overdue property taxes in this last budget, which, as the ranking member of the Finance Committee, we offered homestead exemption, we offered property tax relief at every turn and was denied. Instead, Columbus decided to meddle in our income taxes that left most Ohioans with no change at all, or a change you could barely see, and even some of our lowest income residents saw an increase in their income taxes. With that decision that has possibly jeopardized our state revenues, could have doubled our property tax that we offer today. Do not let any politician look at you in the eye and say that we do not have the money to pay for property tax relief at the state. The so-called solutions that have seen any traction in Columbus have only given us a false choice. And that choice is, Columbus is saying, if you want property tax relief, that might jeopardize the teachers in your school district or school programs. If you want property tax relief, that could come at feeling safe in your community because your local levies for your first responders are going to give your city less. If you want property tax relief, it will mean more levies on your ballot. And if your community approves them, it means your taxes will overall increase. I want to be very clear, that is a false choice. We have the money to pay at the state for property tax relief now. We can expand the homestead exemption, we can freeze property taxes for our seniors, and we can offer circuit breakers to get Ohioans relief now, while we work on a long-term solution to clean up the mess that is our property tax system. And all of this does not have to come at the expense of our first responders, of our schools, or our parks. This shouldn't be a Democrat versus Republican debate. There are red states that have these exact same proposals that haven't voted for a Democrat in over a decade. Each of these proposals, each one of them that would have real relief for Ohioans would cost less than 1% of the overall state's budget. In a state that passed a $90 billion of hard-working Ohioans' money, it's a drop in the bucket. If other states can figure it out, so surely can Ohio too. And it is a choice Ohio is going to make if we do nothing. It doesn't have to be this way. It is possible to still get something done before these increases come into effect, and that is what we're doing here today. We actually have good partners in the legislature, and each one of the proposals I have mentioned actually have a Republican, a bipartisan support on that. The problem is we don't have enough. I've seen us pass bills in the middle of the night with no debate. I've watched as our governor has called us into special elections for much less. It is time for the state legislature to actually do its job and help Ohioans now. And with that, I'd pass it over to my colleague, Representative Phil Robinson.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Robinson, and I'm a state representative in House District 19, which covers the southeastern part of Cuyahoga County from Solon all the way over to Brecksville and Seven Hills. I want to first thank Ranking Member Bride Sweeney for really outlining what's happening, her leadership on the Finance Committee as our ranking member, and also County Executive Ronayne for all your leadership as well. For far too long, the state has long neglected to properly fund Ohio public schools. As many of you already know, not once, not twice, not three times, but four times until recently, the state Supreme Court said the way that we were funding public schools was unconstitutional. This neglect led to higher property taxes, and schools had to do more with less, and also led to us having to end up having levies all across the county and across the state. Now, in the state constitution, for those who may not be familiar, there's very few things that are explicitly stated in there, but one of them is around our public schools. And to quote, thorough and efficient system of common schools is one of the state legislature's few explicit responsibilities spelled out in the Ohio Constitution. When I started in the state legislature back in 2019, there was effectively no public school funding formula in place. State amounts were frozen, districts were either capped or loosely guaranteed funding, and state aid for students was disconnected from the real cost of what it costs to educate a child. And the funding was heavily dependent on local property taxes. Now, Ohio's funding system has been broken, unfair, and unpredictable for decades. But in the 134th General Assembly, with a bipartisan group who led by Representative Bride Rose Sweeney and Representative Jamie Callender, we were able to finally get historic school funding formula passed in the state legislature. Before that, schools had to rely more on property taxes when the state pays less, and it resulted in communities having to pay more. And either you were caught in two different worlds. If you were a community who did well, then you found yourself being overtaxed. If you were a community who didn't have a lot of resources, you had underfunded and under-resourced schools. And just to really double down on that example, you had Solon, where my wife and I live with our two children. In 2018, we had a levy. Now, this is a school that's ranked in the top 3 in the state every single year. Yet we had to pass a levy, not only for operating, but other costs just to continue to provide that same level of education. And then you have the city of Cleveland schools, even after they had tremendous gains over the last decade, were having to find themselves having now to go back to the ballot box in order to have another levy. That is not sustainable. So after we pass a fair school funding plan, a bipartisan needs-based formula that once it's fully funded, and what I mean by fully funded is our Democratic caucus wanted to go all in right there for this historic investment. The money's there. Unfortunately, the majority party said that we would do this every 2 years. So although this is a historic amount of investment we're putting into schools, every 2 years we have to fight for that, to have another down payment on something that we promised the residents of the state of Ohio. Increased state aid, individually designed for school district needs, made state aid more predictable so districts knew how to create their budgets. If you ever sat in a school district and talked with a superintendent prior to Fair School Funding Plan, you were asked to make a 3 to 5 year plan for your budget, but you had no idea what was going to be in the budget. So essentially you were flying blind. Now you are able to, in a very succinct and deliberate way, plan and know exactly what it costs in order to fund your schools. I'm proud to be part of the group led by Representatives Bride Rose Sweeney and myself and others on the Finance Committee. We were able to secure $1.5 billion for schools over the next 2 years. And then we were also able to update the formula. Not to get too wonky, but in order to make sure you're truly paying for the cost of educating a child in the state of Ohio, we must use the most up-to-date inputs. And that was something that was key in this last funding budget that we got, operating budget that we were able to complete. The local share of funding would have increased to unprecedented 65% if we did not update that formula. So that would have been really a burden for the residents of the state of Ohio. This historic investment helped provide for the next several decades funding to combat what was unconstitutional funding before, and it allowed us to not rely solely on property taxes in order to be able to fund our schools. And lawmakers must continue to support fair school funding. So talk to your state representative, talk to your state senator in the Ohio General Assembly, because we need to continue to push to get the remaining money in order for the fair school funding to take effect for all of our schools. We put a down payment on it. Now we need to make sure that we finish the job. It's important that the majority party make sure that that happens. And then the last part is the local government fund. And so many people don't think a lot about that. But when we think back to Governor Kasich back in 2011, they basically gutted the local government fund. And I'm sure County Executive Ronayne has talked to many mayors and many council presidents all over the county, in which that has really basically disinvested in our first responders, our police, our firefighters, making sure that the roads and streets we depend on have the funding that they need. And so what happens when we don't fund in that? What happens when you cut $1 billion in local government fund in Cuyahoga County? It means people have to rely again on going back to the ballot box, asking residents to pay higher taxes, increasing property taxes, and then going back to have levies again. And so Representative Juanita Brennan and I have introduced House Bill 573, which will restore local government funding back to the 2008 level, which would ensure $1 billion would go back to the communities and cities throughout the state of Ohio, which would therefore make sure that a resident doesn't have to choose between wanting to support moving forward with our schools and our communities and being able to continue to keep up with their property taxes. And I'll just close with this. Maybe about 6 months ago, I went to Walton Hills for a town hall meeting with Danielle Turner Birch, who's a school board member on the Bedford City Schools. And we were talking there, and almost every resident in that room was someone who either retired or on the precipice of retiring. And they said, look, I've done all the right things. I played by the rules. I have everything set. And now you're raising my property taxes. And I don't know how I'm going to be able to keep up with that. And you're making me choose between being able to pay my bills and being able to live somewhere, or whether or not I want to invest in the students in the schools that, of course, I want to support in my community, because that helps increase property values. This puts residents, especially our senior citizens, in a lose-lose situation, and this doesn't have to be. There's more that can be done. The state legislature needs to take action. The majority party needs to make sure we come back to get this solved. The money's there, and this should not trickle down to both our county government and our local and city elected officials. And with that, I'd like to call up Representative Sean Brennan, who's one of our freshman members who's advocating on behalf of seniors, and he'll talk to you a little bit more about some of this legislation that can help curb the situation. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So I want to thank County Executive Chris Ronayne, my good friend, as well as my fellow representatives Bride Rose Sweeney and Phil Robinson for working together to organize this very important press conference this morning. I'd also like to thank Mayors Tim DeGeeter of the City of Parma, Mayor Marie Gallo of Parma Heights, Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb, and all the council members from those cities for working tirelessly for their residents. Our efforts working together helped our communities get back on their feet with no loss of life following the recent storms, and that's something we should all be proud of. I just wanted to mention that. As a homeowner myself, as well as a former middle school and high school teacher in the Brecksville-Broadview Heights City Schools for about 3 decades, a member of Parma City Council for 2 decades, and now State Representative for Parma, Parma Heights, and West Park. Like my colleagues with me today, I'm very concerned about rising property taxes in the state of Ohio and the burden it's placing on our families, particularly our residents who have fixed incomes. It breaks my heart when a resident calls my office to tell me they don't know how they're going to be able to stay in their home or apartment with all the rising costs. I recall when I was a little boy and my dad left us, and my mom lost our house because she couldn't afford to pay the house payment and property taxes on her department store income. It's my experience watching my single mom struggle to keep food on the table and a roof over our head that informs why I went to Columbus to serve you. Unfortunately, over the years, the state has cut its commitment to help fund local services, as you just heard from Representative Robinson and Representative Bride Rose Sweeney, to the tune of tens of millions of dollars to the cities I serve alone. The state has also passed numerous unfunded mandates onto our local governments. These flawed policies have forced communities to go to the local taxpayers in the forms of levies to continue to fund services, including fire, police and EMS services, libraries, schools, parks, senior centers, not to mention addressing our sewers, water lines, and other infrastructure needs. I call this the man behind the curtain phenomenon. I've been talking about this for years. You see, Columbus can collect our taxes, cut our local government funds, and tell our local governments to do more without giving them the money to do it, with simply the flourish of a pen, giving the public the impression that our school districts and cities are not using their funds wisely because they have to go to the taxpayers to fund the services that you need, that you deserve, and that you expect. For instance, for too long, our state government has required our local schools to rely heavily on local property taxes for funding. As a public school teacher, I'm well aware of this. There are many levy campaigns that we were asked to work on. I've always said that this scheme unfairly pits homeowners and senior citizens against our children, which is not a naturally adversarial relationship. Folks I speak to want to do their part to pay their fair share to help the next generation. But with rising costs, it's becoming way too difficult. In my short 20 months serving in the state legislature, I've been very vocal about the state providing more funding to our local communities and property tax relief for Ohio's residents, as well as speaking out against these unfunded mandates on our local governments, which the public in many cases is not even aware of. I have worked hard to forge effective relationships with colleagues on both sides of the aisle, just like Representative Sweeney and Representative Robinson, and we've made some strides, but clearly more needs to be done. In fact, Representative Sweeney, Robinson, and I support multiple proposals that would provide property relief to those we serve. For instance, House Bill 187, also known as the Homeowners Relief Act, would modify the way counties calculate property taxes by weighing property values for the past 3 years rather than just one. This averaging would help protect homeowners from large increases as a result of property valuation adjustments occurring in just 1 year. This bill would also provide more local control over determining property valuations, but I won't get into the weeds on that. Other proposals include several bills that would expand the homestead exemption for our seniors. When Governor Strickland expanded the homestead exemption in 2007, and I think everybody but maybe a couple of you might remember that, it exempted $25,000 of a home value, and there was no income guidelines on that. Today, 17 years later, and I was just with the former governor this last week, what an honor it was to be with him. Now it simply exempts $26,200, and there's a very low income threshold for it, which exempts a lot of our seniors from being able to take advantage of it. On a positive note, the three of us voted to adjust the homestead to match annual inflation. However, Columbus needs to do more to keep up with the increase in property values that we're seeing. That's why we stand ready to work across the aisle, and you've heard it from all three of us today, to pass legislation that expands the homestead exemption to cover an additional 75,000 seniors and raises its value to $40,000, providing nearly $250 million in targeted relief for the most vulnerable. And that's a bill that was put forward by our good colleague, Representative Dan Troy, who represents part of Cuyahoga County and a portion of Lake County. We also support HB 263, which you may know is known as the 70-70 plan. This would freeze property taxes for residents age 70 and older who make less than $70,000. HB 645, which is known as the circuit breaker bill. That would provide a $1,000 rebate to homeowners and renters whose property taxes or rents, and I want to say that, or rents, because we hear from a lot of renters as well, and I hear from folks who say, you know, renters don't pay property taxes. I was a former renter. I know I pay property taxes. Anybody in the room that pays rent knows you pay property taxes and your rents are going up. And I've got many senior citizens in particular in my district calling me, telling me they don't know how they're going to afford their rent because their rents just went up $150 a month. I mean, I've been on the phone in tears with some of these folks because they just don't know how they're going to do it. This would provide nearly $1 billion in relief. And as Representative Sweeney mentioned, we have the money. It's a choice, and I love the way you put that. It is a choice. This is not a naturally occurring thing. It would provide $1 billion in relief for over 1.3 million middle-class homeowners and renters throughout the state of Ohio. That would be real relief for the people. I stand with my colleagues here today in remaining committed to working with both my Democratic and Republican colleagues at the State House to provide relief to our current and retired, hard-working Ohioans. We hear you. We care about you very much, and I want you to know that. And we're going to fight like hell for you to stay in your homes and stay in your apartments. I love you all. God bless.
Thank you, State Representatives Bride Rose Sweeney, Phil Robinson, and Sean Brennan. I want to just say a few things before we wrap up and go to reporter questions that Kelly's going to wrap us up on. One, the issues in front of us are very real for our Cuyahoga County residents. And I want to say just anecdotally, right coming into office, I called out to one of our representatives in the city of Parma, and I said to the fiscal officer there, what are your major challenges? And they said, it's a local government fund, the local government fund, the local government fund. The money that was coming home to our communities isn't coming home now. And there's a mounting rainy day fund in the state of Ohio, to Rep. Brennan's point, that is mounted, and the money is available from the state of Ohio to give relief. And the other story I tell is one more recently where I reached out to a different member of the state, a state senator in the leadership, and I said, we need help. We need the homestead exemption adjusted. And the response was, that's what Social Security was supposed to be for. The reality, as we all know, and we're seeing across our neighborhoods in Cuyahoga County, that the two ends aren't meeting, that income isn't rising with property valuations. And so we support every bill that these state representatives have put forth. We support the circuit breaker as an example where income has not risen with valuation, where there's a cutoff. If you're on a fixed income and you're not reaching any further gains in your income, there's a cutoff, and that property tax cuts off. We support a homestead exemption increase. It just wasn't enough back when. We support the notion that incomes haven't risen, and we need to actually take that that cap and lift it up such that we have our residents are able to pay their taxes and meet the ends of those taxes. So that homestead exemption has to come up more than it has, because it has not risen with inflation. So we need the state of Ohio legislature to hear us. These three Democrats in front of us today have heard us. They're working hard to make the ends meet by way of the bills that they're initiating. Every one of them that they suggested today, we want to see a fairer hearing. We have, as Rep. Sweeney said, had Republicans pick up with you on some of these bills, but we need more. We need to get to the threshold critical mass of the state of Ohio where we see relief back home in a county like Cuyahoga County, where it has been a stressful fiscal environment for a long time for our residents because incomes have not kept pace with valuation. But the critical piece in this is the state of Ohio's support to hear us, from the governor's office to the leadership in the Senate and the House, to hear our concerns of our residents and do something about it. I want to now shift the conversation in the Q&A to two places because we introduced two different things. One was the property tax informal challenge process at the Cuyahoga County level. Two are the state bill initiatives that are in front of the legislature that my three colleagues down in the state have introduced. The informal challenge process, one more time, this Friday is the deadline to bring forth your informal challenge, to bring it forth by physically visiting the third floor offices of the fiscal office. Michael, if you could raise your hand again, our county fiscal officer, visit his office or visit us online, cuyahogacounty.gov, or submit it by mail by Friday, postmarked your informal appeal. Bring your letters, bring your photographs, and we will review those. Letters will then go back out to residents en masse in the late October and early November time period. If you don't agree with that review by the county, come January, we will open up the Board of Revisions appeal process. And Administrator of the Board of Revisions, one more time, Ron O'Leary, if you could raise your hand. That's our process. The informal review process ends this Friday. That's why we wanted to critically get this out to you today. And then our formal process of revision begins in January. That's part one, but part two is the legislative initiatives that are here to help. We need you to help them by way of getting more sponsors downstate, by getting more votes to help the residents of Cuyahoga County, and I'm sure the other 87 counties of Ohio. Do something. State, we need your help, and we thank these three representatives particularly for their help. Rep. Sweeney, Rep. Robinson, and Rep. Brennan. So we'll take questions on the county informal review process here. We'll take questions from the legislators here, and Kelly, you want to wrap it up and how we want to do this? Thank you to the press for being here today, and colleagues and concerned citizens that are here.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes our news conference. If you would like individual interviews with any of our elected officials or our county's fiscal department, you may do so now. Thank you for coming.
Dan DeRose with 19 News. This is an issue we've been covering now for a couple of months now that county evaluations have gone out. And it's been this issue of the cost of a new home, the cost of existing homes has just skyrocketed over the last 2-3 years. So when it came time for Cuyahoga County to go back out and put new valuations, what is the value of your home? There's a couple of formulas that they use. They have to look at comparable houses in your neighborhood and what they're selling for. Some people have seen their values go up by more than 100%. Now, some people are around the average, which I believe is 28 to 35% is the average, but that is still a chunk. And as you heard from Representative Sweeney, just because your valuation went up by 35% does not mean that your property tax is going to go up by 35%. But it is going to take a hefty jump. You heard from state legislatures that have supported several initiatives at the state level asking for help, that there has to be something done. And it really is this major complex problem. This is not as simple as saying, well, this is the value of my home, and so this is what I pay in taxes. That tax helps pay for schools and services. And the state, over the last decade, 2 decades, has chipped away at what the state has given to local schools, saying that local schools should be paid for with local money. And that is one of the issues when you look at property taxes, why they continue to increase. You have this issue of people who are on fixed incomes, our older population. How are they going to be able to handle a 10, 15, 20% increase of their property tax? And so they're asking for help on the homestead exemption rule. It is based on age, it is based on a frozen income, and looks at the valuation and help that you can get on your property taxes. One of the other big announcements from Chris Ronayne, if you are going to try and fight your property valuation, it is not an easy fight. I have read through a lot of the paperwork involved. You have to submit pictures. You have to submit estimates showing why your property is not worth what they think it is. But then there's an issue there. If you submit certain items, let's say you have a crack in your foundation, well, now you're inviting the county to come in and say, well, we don't think your home is even livable before you make this $30,000, $40,000 repair. It is a real double-edged sword. This has got multiple layers stacked on top. People are happy when they hear that the home of their value is going up, when homes in their neighborhood are selling for way more than what you bought yours. That generally makes people happy, but this is the other side of that sword, is that now your entire neighborhood valuation has gone up, your home valuation is going to go up, which means your property taxes are going up. You do have a Friday deadline in Cuyahoga County to submit at least your initial reason that you want to fight the valuation of your property tax. You hear from representatives say they are on the phone with people crying, worried about losing their homes, losing their apartments. You heard from the last representative say there, yes, even if you live in an apartment, you are going to end up paying for some of this property tax increase because your landlord is going to have to raise the rent. So the Cuyahoga County executive, representatives from Cuyahoga County are asking the state for help. We'll have to see if that comes through as property tax evaluations and valuations are going to be coming out soon as well. If we have any other breaking news, it'll be right here on our digital platforms. Watch for our 11 o'clock news in 10 minutes on CW43, then our noon news on Channel 19. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News. Have a great afternoon.
19 News is everywhere.